Today's information session is brought to you by Enform, but more specifically by Gordon Walsh, who's in the back. Gordon is going to be picking up the second part of this session. My name isn't on here because I think this is Gord's file, which is all good. I'm Andy Reimer, by the way. I do various projects here at Enform, and one of the projects that I've been involved in was this streamlining of the COR Audit Protocol. So I'm going to walk you through the first piece, and Gord's going to walk you through the longer sort of part two. Part one, we're going to look at the triggers for the change. I want to introduce you to the principles that drove this audit streamlining effort, the outcome of that effort, and we also want to talk more broadly about what we're trying to do with the COR program. We don't see what we've done with the audit protocol in isolation. It's part of a larger sort of rethink of how we deliver the COR program. And so we want you to kind of see it in that larger context. And then in part two, we are going to walk through sort of touch down at six or seven points in that protocol and the protocol change. Part two will be much more relevant for auditors. Part one is, I think, relevant for everyone, but for people thinking from a company standpoint, part one is probably a little more interesting. All right, so why the change? Haven't we done enough changing? Which is a very legitimate complaint and question. In 2010, for those of you who've been around and in this business and have been familiar with the COR program, between 2009 and 2010 was this dramatic reinvention of the protocol. The Basic Safety Program, the BSP Audit Protocol, had been in place for well over a decade, maybe more, I'm not sure. I know it's at least 10 years. So in 2010, there was this dramatic shift in the audit protocol. One of the key things it did was it consolidated. It met the standards for Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia. It was sort of freshly tuned for the industry. And it was also a lot bigger. I don't know if any of you noticed from 2009 to 2010 or what the effort level changed from 2009 to 2010, but based on the smiles in the room, those who went through that change know what I'm talking about. What's happened since we introduced that 2010? We've had about 3,000 plus company audits come through our doors, each one of them going through QA review. Unfortunately, far too many going through QA review several times, which means we could, if we're actually looking at how many times have we had to crack open an audit with the 2010 questions, the answer is probably 7,000, 8,000. We've taught roughly, I think we quickly did this number in our head, around 16 auditor courses on the new protocol. Starting last year, Gord has been running auditor workshops. We've run about 16 auditor workshops, and those have been great for not just us telling you stuff, but you telling us stuff. And those have been important for that. And then about 38 one-on-one auditor meetings, and we've, especially in the last year or so, we've had a lot more interactions with COR holding companies. Talk to them about what are the challenges they're facing, how's it working for them, where's the rub for them. The key issues have been clear for a while. These are the key issues as we see them. This is what triggered the in-house push to see some change here. The key issue is that it's too much work. The auditing effort is too high. Both in terms of the amount of data you need to collect, and then on the reporting side, the effort is not aligned with, if you want to benchmark against other kinds of audits and other kinds of COR auditing, it's too big, it's too long. Other related issues, interview efforts in particular were high and not efficiently targeted. When we looked at this, we said, so why is this so much work? And the interview effort in particular is what popped to the surface, right? So when auditors came back and said, you know, if you ask all these questions, it takes over an hour to do an interview, we actually listened to you and said, wow. And, you know, in time, we had our staff going out and doing audits on the protocol, and they were right. We think an hour and a quarter is far too long to do an interview in a health and safety audit. If you're interviewing key personnel, it might go to that, but all your interviews should not be taking an hour and a half. Some questions were framed in such a way that objective evidence-based measurement would be challenging. Okay? And we knew that because we saw answers, and you go, that's a lousy answer, and you go, yeah, but that's a tricky question to answer. How would you answer that objectively? How would you gather evidence for that? And so some of the challenges you were having and you were facing, the root problem was the question or how you were being asked to establish that. All right. So we looked at this, and late in 2013. So late in 2012, it feels like I've done a year's worth of work already. Late in 2012, we kind of said, you know, we're not putting it off any longer. Something needs to give here. Something needs to change. And we were tasked with finding efficiencies in the core audit. And we were quite happy to be tasked with that. I think we all believed in that project. And we got management to support to say, yeah, go find efficiencies, make this easier. And we set a couple of rules for ourselves. One is we wanted to reduce the effort in measuring and reporting. But we didn't want the 2009 to 2010 shift for companies, because that was a huge jump for a lot of companies, a lot of management to change. So you wanted to minimize change management for our core holders. Okay, and it was supposed to be ready for the bulk of the 2013 auditing season. Okay, any one of these you can do. It's doing all three that's tricky. Okay, and honestly, kind of terrifying. In I think it was October. Somewhere, I think it was October, November, Jason DeGagne, who some of you may have met, works in our department on the training side. Him and I were up in northwest, well, I guess that's northeast BC, northwest Alberta, doing some OSARs, and ended up having a few hours free in an afternoon. So we took the protocol, and it was bigger than this because it was the 2010, 2012 one. And we started to try to apply this. So how can you cut down the effort on questioning but still measure the same thing? And in 2 hours we got through page 1. Okay? And that's like a 100-page document. And we're going, oh, what have we promised to do here? So it wasn't until about first week in January that 3 of us sat down and tried to do this in earnest, writing down all our results instead of just playing around with the concept. So this is our timeline. This is the timeline we set for ourselves, and this is the timeline we've achieved. So in January, right after we all got back from our Christmas holidays, we sat down and we produced a streamlined draft based on 3,000 company audits, 16 courses, so on, okay? And all the feedback we've been getting from auditors and companies. And there's 3 of us sort of spent every working hour and several extra hours and weekends crunching through every question. Towards the end of January, we had produced a new version, it's a revised, streamlined version. We sent that out for what we're calling a cross-industry subject matter review, and we sent it off to Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC governments. The reviewers here included HSE specialists in various companies across the 6 trade associations, as well as very experienced auditors in the auditing community. Yeah, provincial, yeah. We then got everybody's feedback, laid it all out on a table. There was, 25 people's feedback, and went question by question, everybody's feedback and ideas about whether what we had done worked or didn't work. We then took that revised draft to the Enform Advisory Committee, which represents the 6 trade associations, and said, this is what we've done. Can we get industry support? Which they gave us. We then took that. Since then, we've been working hard to finalize government approvals. We've been busy trying to communicate to you, organizing sessions like this, and what I was supposed to do this morning, which is a round of revisions on the EC audit tool. We already have a prototype up. We're just making sure everything's really clean. So that's where we're at. We're gonna communicate this at the Petroleum Safety Conference next week in Banff, and May 13 is our plan go live. So barring things like earthquakes, SARS, tsunamis, yeah. We want to go, and I mean, the plan is we're tracking to that. E-compliance thinks we can do that. We think we can do that. We are headed for go live May 13. What does this mean? All license key activations after 12 a.m. on May 13th will contain the 2013 version of the protocol. Okay? It's automatically the way it works. We've done this in 2012. We kind of know how this works. So here's the little bit of a quirk. We're going to communicate if anybody has registered an audit, got an audit key from us, and been very proactive and punched it into their EC audit tool, and so has the 2012 version, we're going to be very kind. We will reissue license keys to allow you to do that. Now, that said, don't start your audit. If you want to be on the if you want on the new protocol, do not. Anything you enter in your EC tool now isn't going to carry over. Okay? It won't allow you to talk to a later version. You have to do that, otherwise things go really sideways. Okay? So if you've kind of started, but you want to do it on the new protocol, please talk to us. Let's get you guys on the new protocol. So as long as you're activating the key after May 13th, you're good. If you've activated already, but you're only going to start your audit afterwards, come talk to us. We'll get a fresh one. Okay, so how did we actually do this? Every question in every topic was reviewed, and if it needed rewriting. From the perspective of, does this question add value? So every so often we found questions where we said, you know what, this is really covering the same evidence being covered in this question. Let's have one question, not two. There's a couple of places the question of add value is, could anyone actually measure this? Or this is a question that gets everybody scores 100%. And we know why they score 100%, because nobody could actually measure this. I mean, one of the big challenges was 3 provincial standards. Alberta and BC are quite similar. Saskatchewan's quite different and very detailed. And trying to get alignment on all of those. Well, I mean, one of the things we did have on the table was I mean, we were willing to say goodbye to a province if we really had to get efficiencies at this point. I mean, we were very committed to it. In the end, we found we didn't have to, that we found a lot of the efficiency we wanted. And I think that's good, because in the end, having one protocol across all 3 provinces ultimately in this industry does make more sense. The industry, by the way, if you're not familiar, is broken up about 15 and 15% in BC and Saskatchewan, and about, what does that leave? About 70% in Alberta in terms of operations. All right. Is it clear and measurable as written? Is the question we asked. Are the validation method or methods appropriate? You can have a good question, but the wrong way to validate it. And I think in the 2010 protocol, there was a lot of questions that were, okay, find the documentation. Oh, and we should also interview, and oh, we should also observe. And we asked kind of the hard question, which is, okay, if you've answered it, if documentation will sufficiently answer this, should we also force it to be an interview and an observation? At what point is that adding value? So it'll always add value. How much value is it adding? And where we said, I don't think it adds enough value, we said, this is the best way. This is the best validation methods. Let's pull the other 2 or the other one off. And then, is the guideline well written, and does it provide meaningful guidance on collecting and or assessing the evidence? So you rewrite the question if you need to. And I think there wasn't a single guideline they were all rewritten. Now, the concepts may not have changed, but we hope they're a lot clearer. I mean, one of the slides I don't have on here, which I sometimes talk about, is there's an ISO standard around auditing management systems, evidence-based management, and there's 3 tests you want to apply. You want to ask the question of sufficiency, relevance, and verifiability, right? So are we asking for a sufficient amount of information? Are we asking a sufficient question, right? Will it cover enough? How relevant is it? Good question, interesting, but is it relevant to a health and safety management system or an outcome? And then finally, verifiability. Are you asking a question you can actually verify? And it was interesting. Verifiability was one we returned to a lot because we're saying some of these you can't verify. All right. So how did we end up doing? We went from 182 questions to 118. So it's a 35% reduction in questions. And then you'll see sort of where we've been a lot more disciplined about saying what's the best validation method, and only have more than one validation method where there's real value add of multiple validation methods. So that allowed us to really chop down these, which are time points, right? It's one question, but if you have to look at documents and interview, that's times 2. If you have to look at documents, interview, and observe, that's times 3, right? So we're dropping sort of 50 to 60% on here and about 40% here. Okay, and we said interviews in particular was our problem. We felt, we benchmarked against other core protocols. Okay, I guarantee we are now middle to high end still. But if you can imagine this is middle to high end, we were out of scope here. Okay, so we've gone from 115 senior manager questions down to 18 to 36. Okay. And especially if you think about senior management, especially when you're dealing with senior management in a large company, we were asking questions that do you really expect senior management in a large company to know anything about frontline PPE? Is it necessary in terms of a management system, right? So there was some healthy hacking and slashing at this level particularly. The minimums and maximums, what we've done is where we only expect certain managers to know certain things, we've defined that, which means that every senior manager would get asked at least 18, but if they also run the health and safety committee and they do inspections and you might get as high as 36. I don't know that this hypothetical person even exists, all right? So we've dropped these. Any auditor in here who works for other CPs, this looks a lot more familiar, doesn't it? Yeah. So it's not like we're not selling out the farm here. All right. So based on real auditing experience with previous protocols, we estimate the following outcomes. Now there's so many caveats in this, but we thought it was important for you to put it in this light anyway. The average interview time. If you were doing the old protocol and you were really asking every question every time, as per the instructions, you were over an hour. If you have the same rigor this time around, it's 20 to 40 minutes. We think there should be a 30 to 40% reduction on on-site time. A lot of that will be interview time you're going to save. 30 to 40% reduction in report writing time, and companies should find this, and probably some auditors as well. This is actually going to speed up our QA. If you can imagine the QA process on 100 and, what was it, how many? Having built tools for our QA reviewers, there's a lot of questions there. Okay, if you're QAing 118 questions instead of 182. Okay, and you're doing 10 to 15 of these a week. Think about the kinds of savings we're going to get. We're hoping, and we're also hoping that we've produced a clear product, and we think with clear questions, measurable questions, and clear guidelines, we're hoping that the quality of the audit goes up. And I guarantee QA review on a good quality audit is a quarter of the time as a QA review on somebody who's really struggling with it. All right, minimizing change management. This was the flip side. Make everything more efficient, don't change anything. It's tricky. So here's what we did to try to minimize change management for companies. First of all, we ensured that scoring totals within elements and topics remain nearly identical. So the topics haven't changed at all. The kind of elements you're measuring in a topic haven't changed at all. And the value, right, is wherever we could create equivalent value, we did. We had to ensure all 3 government audit standards continued to be met, and they did. And this was the most important one. As much as possible, and I think, in fact, substantively it is, we did not introduce any new components in the audit. We're not expecting companies to build any new module in their management system to meet this protocol. If you're still struggling with the 2010, 2012, you may still struggle with this because we're asking for the same kind of things to be in the system, the same things we're going to measure in the system. But it's nothing new, all right? Where questions, validations, or guidelines change, the goal was to offer the auditor more clear and sometimes additional multiple avenues to answer the question more objectively. So we are offering our auditors new, better places to look for evidence of systems and implementation, but we're not looking for new components. Okay? So, as you can see, there's no change to what is measured or the weighting. So this is the scoring by element. In 2012, this is the scoring by element in the Streamline protocol. And if I had broken down all the numbers by element, it would be this identical as well. By topic, I should say. And then in terms of scoring by validation method, again, you can see we've moved a little bit, a percentage or two out of observations into interviews, but by and large, the weighting is the same. Okay? So, what does it mean? Okay? A company can reasonably expect a nearly identical score in this audit protocol as they would receive on the 2012 audit protocol, and we had to add a caveat. Both were conducted by a competent auditor. We're not suggesting anything about anybody in this room at all with that statement. What we're saying is the 2012, because there was points of confusion at times, consistency is not always possible. But if it was, if 2012 had been executed, you should end up with similar scores. Now, we know there's going to be slight variations. Okay? There would be if you had 2 different people do a 2012. But we are expecting that a company with a system that was well measured before and is well measured under this one, technically you should end up with a nearly identical score. The rapid delivery of a more streamlined audit protocol is part of a larger strategic project. And I just wanted to show that to you today. As a core program, as a core department, we want to move beyond policy and policing to helping industry succeed at safety. If we're just doing policy and policing, then we're doing what the government asks us to do, but I don't think we're adding enough value to industry. We want to help industry succeed. So in some ways, the streamlining of this protocol is part of a larger strategy, not just to enable and measure, is not just to measure, but to enable. We want companies to have good health and safety management systems. We just don't want a complex way to measure them. We actually want them to improve. And we actually believe that if you create a better tool that's easier to use, that companies actually will be able to understand, that more people will understand, that is part of this larger push to help build better systems in the industry. So one of the things we're doing, we're going to new task-based auditor course. We're going to try to drive more practicality into that. We have a lot of, especially internal auditors, who, as Gord will tell you, audit twice every 3 years. Your illustration is great. Gord's got an illustration. How would you like to drive on the Deerfoot twice every 2 years, and that's the only driving you do, right? We appreciate that it's a scary endeavor. And so our auditor course, again, we want to push it towards here's the steps you need to go through. In step 1 in auditing, you're going to do this, this, and this. In step 2, you're going to do this, this, and this, and build the course around that. with the goal of having people who know how to do the task when they're done. And we're working on safety program development for companies, again, part of trying to rethink how we're doing everything. Auditor workshops, we started those last year. Those have been really successful. It's really helpful. You know, email, there's a couple things we've done. We've done a lot more phone contact now on the QA cycle. That was good. More contact is better, as it turns out. Far fewer misunderstandings. Face-to-face is even better. There's nothing like getting everybody in a room. People can ask their questions, get the answer, and that's been helpful. And we're also doing a lot more on-site consultations. If companies are struggling with this, we are willing to go on site. We're willing to chat. We're willing to have them in here. We're willing to visit their sites and see what we can do for them. And this is another piece. We want to deliver this year, at least some of the projects are on my plate, are bringing people together to build tools and templates. So rather than just teach you how to do incident investigations, we'll create a stock form that you can then take, make it work for your company, templates for formal hazard assessment. This is the kinds of stuff we want to deliver this year. And that's really part of trying to get giving companies everything they need to succeed. And the other thing we've done, I don't know, have any of you had a chance to see some of these online videos? Okay. If you haven't, if you go to the Enform website, you go to Safety Certifications, Core Videos, click on Core Videos. We started with the places people were having trouble. They're about 10-minute video at the most. They're kind of a whiteboarding exercise with a narrator who walks you through a concept. We tried to keep it as simple and straightforward and understandable as we could. So there's 10 minutes on what is formal hazard assessment and how does that compare to inspections and site-specific. Then there's a follow-up. What's hazard control? What's a hierarchy of control? And how does that fit with what we're asking with maintenance and WMIS requirements? We have one, and those are good for both companies and auditors for understanding what we mean by this stuff. We've got two videos. It's one topic on sampling. We know that the sampling math is not everybody's forte. The concept of sampling math is not everybody's forte. So we've tried to create a rather simple explanation for, if you've got 10 records, how many do I sample? If I've got 100 records, how many do I sample? If I have 10,000 records, how many do I sample? Okay? So walking through that. And again, on the company side, you may find that interesting if you're wondering how in the world does the auditor actually do this? Or how does this work if I have all these records? And then finally, the streamlining protocol, which we're set to deliver on May 13th. All right, so we're working hard to see you succeed at building and auditing health and safety management systems. This is one of our first opportunities where we said, let's pull companies and auditors in one room. And so we're going to facilitate the conversation between you in this next piece here. All right? How to have a faster, hassle-free audit cycle. All right? So this is an audit is between two parties, the auditor and the thing being audited, the company, right? And both parties can function in a way that drives some velocity into this cycle, makes things move quicker, smoother, fewer misunderstandings. I can't imagine anybody's against that. Auditors. Audit planning is a key piece to this, where we see audits stumbling and creating problems at the end as often the root cause is front-end planning wasn't carried out. So auditor, you're going to work with a company. Company, expect your auditor to approach you before the audit to get some information. Get that information to the auditor. There's a reason they're asking for it. Number of employees. This is what the auditor needs to know to plan their audit. They need to know the number of employees. They need to know the number of sites overall. What's your head office? Multiple head offices. Field sites. Where are you at? Where are you active? How many sites do you have? Do you have a trucking fleet? Are these trucks actually work sites? In oil and gas industry, often trucks are work sites. Are you across multiple provinces? Are your sites across multiple provinces? Or are you going to want a core across multiple provinces? The auditor has to know this. You should expect these questions from your auditor in advance. Multiple industry codes. This is an important one. Your auditor won't know you have multiple industry codes unless you tell them. and the core rebates and such is based on what codes are you covering, because a lot of companies carry multiple codes. From an auditor point of view, I don't think you appreciate how eager we are to help you in the planning stage, especially if by helping you in the planning stage, we don't have to talk to you at the end of the process to say, we've got a problem with sites, right? That's the bad time to discover that. If you have any kind of complexity in your audit, let us know. Give us your plan. We'll have somebody look at the plan. There's nothing like having had somebody at Enform sign off on the plan. Then if there's any headaches at the end, we're with you in the battle, right? Right? Make us liable for that plan. Feel free. We love it. We don't mind it. We'll take it. All right. Companies, prepare for the audit in advance. Okay? I have, for the last couple of years now, sort of been the guy that gets tasked with getting Enform's core department ready for our audits by provincial government bodies. Okay? So when Saskatchewan comes in to audit us, when BC comes in to audit us for the work we do as a CP, it's my job to get us ready for that. So what do? I'll tell you what I do as the company insider. I look at the protocol they're going to measure us by, and I ask, what documents are they going to want to see for that? And I'll pull all the documents together. I'll have a plan for where everything goes. In our case, I'll put all the documents on one zip stick, and when they come here, I'll ask, do you want it in advance? Some of them I'll even send the documents in advance. Now, you can't do that with a core audit, but the goal is have your stuff ready, right? So when they show up at the door, here's your stuff. List of employees with the positions held. Site access arranged, right? You can determine in advance what sites, right? Make sure. Now, that might change. If the auditor finds stuff, he says, well, actually, it's going to have to be this site based on this and this. That's fine. There's negotiating that can happen there. But the more you can do this for your auditor, the faster he moves or she moves through your system, the more headache-free it is for everybody. All right. Companies and auditors. Negotiate or contract schedules and timelines in advance. Okay? I'm a huge fan you write everything in the contract because then there's no confusion. Now, first day on site, pretty easy to contract. Last day, you're going to have to build a bit of flexibility, but you can certainly build expectations around that. Report submission to Enform. Okay, when will your auditor be sending that off to Enform? You can put that in the contract. Company. Make life easier on your auditor. Okay, the other thing that happens whenever we have the government come in and audit us is we have a point person. We tell the auditor, you have any questions of any sort, talk to this person. Okay, sometimes it's me, sometimes it's somebody else, whoever, right? And they say, you know, I'm trying to find this information. Go, I know where to find that, or I know who you need to talk to find that information. So that auditor is never sitting around waiting. There's always somebody getting them what they need. Offer a place to work near necessary documents. Have requested employees available, ready and available for interviews. Okay, the auditor has to make the call on who gets interviewed, but as soon as he's made the call on who to get interviewed, you can get those people ready and make sure that they're scheduled and they're there, and there's no downtime. Have sites ready and available for observation tours. So auditors in the room, if companies did this for you, yes, happy? You'd like it. Yeah, nobody's saying they wouldn't like that. Okay. Auditors, of course, you need to communicate your needs at the pre-audit meeting and throughout. One of the things we'd like to see companies do, because we find that companies and auditors are sometimes on different pages, is get a time frame commitment on report submission to Enform. You can actually contract this if you want. Now, you're going to have to be realistic with your auditor, and your auditor will have to be realistic with you. But the two of you can agree. The auditor, by standard, has to get that report in within 45 days. But if your auditor comes to you and it says, I think you should hire me because I always get my audit report done. I sit down when I'm on your last day at site. I sit down, and within 2 weeks, I guarantee it will be at Enform. and an auditor wants to do that and you want to contract it, that's legitimate. You can't contract for more than 45 days. Then the government will get after us. I think you're going to discover that the more you have open and clear communication, auditor, company, both parties are happy. And you're going to get better results out of it. This is, I mean, like I said, let's take the mystery out of it. Everybody's clear up front. The process just works a lot smoother. And those of you who've had a good auditor have seen this in action already. You've seen them sit down with you at a pre-audit meeting. They've been clear on their expectations. You know what they need. They communicate their needs. They do a nice follow-up. Those of you who've had a good auditor and have experienced this already. So this is the end of part one, the streamlined Enform COR Audit Protocol 2013. We're hoping, we believe it's going to improve your auditing experience for both parties. The ultimate goal is we want health and safety management systems that actually work. So if a good audit tool gets you better recommendations and companies act on those recommendations, that's a part of the puzzle of getting better systems.